And now, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our esteemed guest speakers this evening. Jim and Blake Marggraff are a unique father-son duo and are incredibly accomplished CEOs and innovators in their respective industries. For more than 25 years, Jim Marggraff has developed innovative solutions, improved learning, and advanced human thought. In 2013, he founded iFluence, developing technology that transforms intent into action through your eyes. In 2007, he invented the world's first smart pen when he founded LifeScribe. And prior to that, Jim invented the world-renowned LeapPad learning system, where his dedication to technology-based learning helped Leapfrog sell over 1 billion worth of LeapPads and educational content worldwide in less than 5 years. His son, Blake, graduated from Washington University in 2015, yes, that's this year, and is the founder and CEO of Ephraimix, a health IT company that sits at the intersection of research, medical impact, and technology. In 2011, Blake won the world's largest science fair with over 4 million competitors worldwide for a project involving simulated cancer treatment. Blake is also an Eagle Scout and a black belt, and has spoken at dozens of events to thousands of students and educators about effective communication and presentation. And those are only part of their impressive resumes. Here to speak on the topic of raising successful children, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jim and Blake Marggraff.
Thank you very much. Eddie, thank you very much. And Rabbi Fischel, it's such an honor and a pleasure to be here tonight. I appreciate it. Thank you. In the late 80s, National Geographic commissioned Gallup to do a survey of geographic knowledge. The results were chilling. Turns out that 1 in 7 adults in the United States couldn't find the U.S. on an unmarked map of the world. And 1 in 4 couldn't find the Pacific Ocean. This is relevant tonight because at that time, I looked at the statistic, and I had the good fortune to be at a startup company already with a half dozen colleagues. It had grown quite large and went public in 1992, and so was purchased by Cisco a few years later, so it had some financial flexibility, and said this is a problem that needs to be addressed. How can we as a country believe that we're going to continue to be a world power when we just don't know not only name, place, geography, we don't know culture, languages, we don't understand the issues in the world. So set about to address this. And the approach that I took was with this tool. So I teamed up with a roommate of mine from MIT, and we created a means to teach the world geography. So I said, what better way than being able to imagine we could create a sphere with a base, with a processor, and a stylus, and we could allow you to interact with a globe. Now, it sounded trivial at first, and I told people, and they said, you're leaving telecommunications to go to a company that's going to make globes? And my friends thought I lost it. And I said, what we can do, though, is something fascinating. If we can engage children at the time that's relevant, my kids, Blake and Annie, were the age of your children. So I'd like to show you this.
Welcome to Odyssey.
So,
touch the globe for information. For GeoZone games, touch play.
So this works by allowing me to touch it with a stylus. So I can take a stylus and touch a spot on the globe and hear a country name. There we go. I'll turn it up.
China, Libya, Algeria, Mali.
Okay, now to a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old that had never heard these sounds before, it's a fascinating sound. They hear the word Turkey, which they think is funny. Or they touch a country, Burkina Faso, and who knows what the capital of Burkina Faso is? Ouagadougou. And when you say that, kids love to repeat it. But if you then move from there, we put tens of thousands of facts in this product, in this globe. So you could hear birth rates, death rates, people per telephone, religions, languages, unbelievable amount of information. You could also hear, which kids just adore, sounds.
Music.
So we put sounds in, and we created music based upon local themes and instruments from all around the world So I could touch Cuba,
Cuba, music.
which causes people to move. And you want to see what happens when children will touch Russia.
Russia, music.
Well, somber.
Russia.
That piece of music will cause any 3, 4, 5-year-old to begin moving their arms and moving about predictably. I took this to schools around the country and watched this behavior. So was taken by what could happen with this. And this will play games and prompt you to learn countries. And at the time, my children would tap this, stand in the chair, dance. I have footage of this to this day of watching them do so, as well as then seeing what happens when they could hear a country in the news. So my son Blake heard Russia and said, "Mommy, they're talking about Russia." Now, why would a 4 or 5-year-old know that? So it was very exciting. So from there, I moved forward and I took this technology and said, what if we could take this, and had the idea, say, if we flatten this out, we could put paper on it, we could then allow kids to interact through paper, and maybe we could teach them a different way to read. See, who knows the company Leapfrog? Okay. So at the time, we created something called a LeapPad, and this was a version of it at that time. And I brought in Blake, who auditioned at the time to be one of the voices. The company was about 20 people. So he auditioned, and he was chosen blind by the team that was looking at talent. And so his voice was in now probably 50 million or 60 million products, which was a lot of fun. But what intrigued me about this was the manner in which we could interact with different technology to learn. And it started with listening and reading. And then we advanced it. I found a way to be able with the team to put in a means to record your voice. So we could record your voice and assign it to images on the paper. Or we could let you write on the surface by putting a graphite tip in the stylus. And now we had reading, writing, speaking, listening. 4 basic modes of human communication. And we had a tool that was really interesting. And so we had great success. And this is a paper I found before coming tonight, pulled out of a drawer that Blake had written at the time. And again, about this age, says what my dad has done. He's helped millions of kids by creating tools to help them learn, to show them that they could, and teaching them how they could while having fun. What more could you want? Oh yeah, no math homework. So I looked at this. The next step was, looked at this interaction with reading, writing, speaking, listening, and said, what if we could find a way to collapse that into another type of platform? And at the time, I read an article in a Wired magazine that talked about a company in Sweden that had made a means to be able to put a camera in the tip of a pen and be able to move the pen around and by a pattern of dots on paper, track the location of the tip. So I went over there and brought the technology back into Leapfrog and said, I'm going to create a multimodal computer. And people said, again, what? It sounds a little crazy. Why? Well, why? Because we could advance the way we learn by giving somebody a tool where basically an intelligent agent in your hand can respond to you when you're interacting and learning how to write, literally writing out letters and hearing their sounds, or writing out a math problem like a quadratic equation and having a pen in your hand help you solve it. So that was the idea. And did it, put a team together, and it was pretty exciting. It won an unprecedented number of awards. And again, I brought this home. You'll see how this ties together with my family. So from there, looked at this and said, I really would like to push this further. And I'd like to not just be able to have a chunky pen for kids, but I'd like to do something for all ages, because we were getting feedback that this was helping kids with dyslexia, dysgraphia, and autism, as had the LeapPad because of the modalities of learning. So said, what if we could push this further and help anyone, any age, be able to solve another problem, which is when you're sitting in a meeting and you're taking notes, there's always this question, do I write or do I listen? It's a big struggle for all of us, particularly people with learning disabilities. So I said, okay, how can we solve that problem? So I moved forward and created what I called a smart pen. And at the time, the words that I heard from people were, because he created already the Fly pen, which was chunky, said we have to do this smaller and lighter. And not only do we have to have it now track what you do, we have to put a speaker in it, we have to put a display in it, we have to support earbuds, and we have to connect to a computer. At which point, there was a lot of these 2 words, which you'll hear, which are can't do it, won't work, it's impossible. Those words I have a visceral reaction to. So it turned out it was possible to build a computer in a tube, and worked for a while to do this, and came out with, I then left Leapfrog amicably, started a new company, said we're going to create something for all ages, and created this tool called the LiveScribe Smart Pen. And interestingly enough, a side note on this, we launched this, and with this pen, which I have, I always have one in my pocket, it is a computer, and with this pen, when you write on paper, it records what you write, digitizes it, sends it to your PC, your Mac, your laptop, your phone, but also optionally records audio, so the audio gets synchronized with what you write while you're writing it. You can go back and touch a stroke and hear what was written as you wrote that stroke of ink on the paper at any point in time, or click on it on a computer. So this has profound impact for learning, but it also means if you're trying to learn a language, you can listen, you can write something, a teacher can speak a sentence, it records it, you write down a couple words, you go back and touch wherever the word is and you hear what was spoken at that time. And a colleague of mine took this idea and said, I'm going to create a magic yod. So he created a tool to help his synagogue, kids in the synagogue, learn and practicing for their bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, be able to perform chants. And I was surprised. Some of the uses that occurred were quite amazing. So, as was mentioned, I went forward, I founded LiveScribe, that was company number 5, and then proceeded 3 years ago to meet with a neurologist who had worked about 12 years ago with a patient with quadriplegia, and this patient was locked in, he couldn't speak. And so Dr. Torch sat down and created a tool to allow him to blink with Morse code, and this is in 1998. When I saw this technology in 2012, he'd gone through 7 generations to create a tool now, which was a pair of glasses that someone with ALS or neurological disorder could wear and be able to type with their eyes. And this is advanced, so I said we could take that and we could apply that now to things like virtual reality and augmented reality and push this forward to now allow people to interact with computers in ways that go beyond anything we've imagined. And so I've been doing that the last few years, and we're beginning to look at learning applications for this, at business, at all types of applications that will advance the way we think, the way we learn, the way we communicate as a species. So that's my background. Let me fill in a little gap. I started out when I had founded Explore Technologies to make the globe, but thought I'd have a couple notes. So this is a picture of me as a little child. At the time, I was about preschool. I had a speech disorder. People couldn't understand me. I also was, when we stepped into kindergarten, first grade, we had levels at that time, was put in the lowest level because they said, well, he really doesn't understand what's occurring. And it was about 5 years as I gradually ratcheted up through the educational system to move forward. So it was pretty rough. I was in a single-parent household and managed to go forward. This is along the way, was able to get through high school. Some funny pictures here, boy, goofy to look at. Was a lot of hair and hair. But actually stayed in high school, ended up as a valedictorian in my high school class, moved on, went to MIT as an undergraduate, stayed there as a grad student, and continued on. Struggled at the time. My parents, there was no college education in my family, and there was no money. So there was a lot of question around how to finance education. So gradually, year after year, overcame that. And eventually stepped out and decided I liked creating things. So went to Silicon Valley and began thinking with friends and talking and about ideas and products. And that brings us up today, with the exception of May 25th in 1988. Met my wife a couple of years earlier, MJ, and we got married in California. So that's the early chapter and the more recent chapters of my life, which leads to Blake. So your two-year-old can be anything. They will be anyone. They can be the next president, the next Olympic gold medalist. They can be the next rabbi. They can be the next man that walks on Mars. They can be anything at 2 years old. Then it becomes more real, year by year, and you say, really, what can they be? As, of course, you overcome the challenge, you meet the challenges. So at Blake, here he is at 6, and there are moments along the way that stand out. And so I'd like to share some, and then Blake will share his comments on these too, and we'll see what we can get happening here. So one of the things that happened was we were riding along in a car, and I looked over at him, and at 6, and said, Blake, what are you thinking? Well, what does a 6-year-old say when you ask them what they're thinking? Nothing is one. Okay. So they might say nothing or I don't know. So Blake said, I don't know. And I said, well, here's what I'd like you to do. I knew he had an interest at the time in tools. We had this little workbench. He said, go to think about your workbench. He had this saw. Take a look at that, and what could you do to make that better so it would serve you better? He said, okay. I said, I want you to think about that. Now, I want you to come up with 2 other problems you'd like to solve. I'd like you to think about them, And I want you always to carry them with you. And when you find you're idle, you're not thinking about something, I want you to think about it. And when you go to bed at night, I'd like you to think about it. And wake up in the morning, when you're first waking, lying in bed, I'd like you to think about it. And when you find an answer to one that you're pleased with, then I'd like you to let go of it and put another one in. So you always have 3 problems that you're carrying around trying to solve. It's a wonderful tool. And what happened, I'd go in at night, I'd ask him what problems he's thinking about in the morning and other times in car rides. And it had a pretty significant impact. So then we get to, no audio. Is there any audio there? Okay.
That's all right.
Well, would you like to explain it?
Absolutely. And this, just for context, is right about where my memories begin. So it's pretty unique. We've gone through this a few times, and each time that I hear my dad's story, I hear something new. I also hear something that reminds me of my own experience. It reflects back. This video was the first time I think you had used the camera that you bought, and took many hours editing. And the process was pretty phenomenal. For my 2nd grade class, I was given the assignment to create an advertisement. I had no idea what an advertisement was, nor did I know how to create one. But fortunately, my dad did. And it turned out being something that we still chuckle at, watch just about every New Year's, which is to my dismay and to my sister's delight. You know, this video encapsulates, I think, the turning point for our relationship. Right? Up to when I was 8 years old, it had been predominantly educational. Learn this, think about this, approach problems this way, and then of course, certain elements of vocabulary, can't and impossible, had already been struck. Those were already off the table. But at this point, I began to realize that there was much more to learn, and learn from my dad's experience, not just the specific pedagogical elements.
Thanks. So onward to Blake's chapter. So next, here we are, and he met a friend in school in 4th grade, and of course, at this age, kids really like chemistry when there's combustion associated with it. So, so they began to pursue various types of combustibles. Can you click for me, or did it for you? So, okay, there we go. So said, okay, well, we'll see what we can do here. So we built a little chem lab in the garage, which meant a sink in a place to store some chemicals. And pretty soon we were ordering and buying materials. Of course, it was all in the name of science, but there happened to be a lot of explosions in our neighborhood. And we made some progress. You'll have to do this manually. This stop for me. So that note, by the way, on the words can and impossible, I can't reinforce enough. Because those words were stricken from the household. Literally, when our children said can't, I can't, the sentence stopped, we had a big discussion, and we took them out of their language. And the word when it's impossible, Dad, it's impossible. Either my kids, we just took that out. That also happened to be the case in any of the companies I founded. Those words were just stricken. And to this day, they're absent from my company. So we moved forward, and we happened to have, because Blake and my wife and daughter were coming into Leapfrog regularly at the time and visiting, they'd come in, and Blake would record in the recording studio, and his voice was the voice of Tad, the frog, one of the 3 frogs in the leap pad. And that led to one of the assistants noting that somehow my name got entered, and I ended up winning this award for Father of the Year. Believe me, I turned it down. I said, this is not right. I'm too busy, you know. But anyway, what it did also was it led to some recording at home. They did a video and discussion, and that was another bonding moment as well between us. Thanks. So at the time, he was in Boy Scouts. He seemed responsible. He looked pretty good. He was pursuing karate. He had some discipline. And he got a little older, and he learned to negotiate. He happened to have an electric car, and he said, Dad, I borrow the keys. But he was pretty good at it, the way he went about it. So then came the arraignment. Okay, so I came home, and I knew that he'd been online buying more supplies, and I walked in the house, and I heard from the front door some clicking. This type of click, 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 click. And I walked through the hall, walked to the kitchen, and it got louder, and there's a distinctive sound that a certain type of equipment makes. It's a Geiger counter when it finds radiation. So I went in the kitchen, and there on the kitchen table was a hunk of uranium, and all around the kitchen were Geiger counters, clicking away. And not exactly the thing you want to find. Come home with your kid in the kitchen. And I said, Blake, what's going on? He said, don't worry, Dad. It's this many curies. I figured it out. It's safe. No problem. Come and look. So I dubiously went forward, looked at this rock on a table, bent over, heard the clicking, and said, okay. And I reached down to pick it up. He said, but don't touch it. And I thought, okay, we'll proceed. So at that point, he had ordered lead. We poured lead in the garage, making shields for this because he had to get proper radiation protection. And he switched from the rock of uranium to a tube from a dentist's office, a dentist x-ray tube with a big power supply. And now we had that in our garage as well, and we're pouring lead. And I said, enough. I'd like some help here. So went off, and he took it off to the high school. And now he had to do some negotiating with the head of the biology class, advanced placement biology, physics, and chemistry, all of whom knew Blake and liked him. They knew of some of his experiments and said, okay, you can bring this in. So we had to set up safety protocols to do this. He did so. And the goal he had after reading this, why don't you explain?
Sure. Sure. So the goal, in complete honesty, was at first just to do something that involved radiation and then justify it with a science fair experiment. But it very rapidly became more than that. My friend Matt and I had both had family members who had had cancer at some point, Matt much more closely. And we read an article. And that article said that sometimes radiation in nuclear power plants could interact with shielding that was supposed to help people, keep them safe, and actually produce more radiation through backscattering. And that blew us both away. And it was a fascinating story, one that I brought back to my dad, and we bounced it around a little bit, and said, what if we could use this for good? What if we could use this, this negative effect that's found in physics for good? And that went forward. I get it. That went forward into many, many tubes and many centrifuges and many, many hours. And this was substantial because this was, and I don't know if my dad fully knows this was the first time that I felt like I had his work ethic. I watched him start company after company, come back late with incredible stories, and he and I would stay up well later than my bedtime going through those stories, going through real challenges that were unadulterated on staff, on goals, on fundraising. And I felt like this was my first shot at doing something like that. So I put in hour after hour, sometimes at the expense of math homework, and somehow made it through the local fair. In fact, I made it 2 days before the fair began, well past the deadline, and fortunately someone let me in. I did really well. I won the local science fair, and then made it to the international science fair. Do you want to?
Thank you. So he made it to the International Science Fair after having won second place in the state of California Science Fair. And we said, I had never heard of the Intel Science Fair before. Apparently it's a very big fair, roughly 7 million kids, 40 countries around the world. And he was entered into this and was flown to LA. So here's a picture a week before, and it's judged by Nobel laureates and academics. It's an amazing event. They take over the Los Angeles Convention Center, and they treat these kids like rock stars. 1,500 kids are flown in from around the country. And so this is the day before. I flew down. There's Blake, there's Matt, and there's this advanced placement bio teacher. And so the next day was the judging. And Blake had said, yeah, I think they're going to judge the next day, but you don't need to stay, Dad. You can go home. So I went home, and but what we found out was this judging was going on, and here's where it happened. So you go ahead and click through. So slow down a little. So Blake, that's Blake, and that's Matt, his friend, and they're sitting there. And what they hear is, well, this year, and already this is third place prize is gone, second place is gone, and they're up to first place. Now, California, second place wasn't even in the running. So they're convinced that this is over, but they're just sitting there listening. And the camera was right there next to them, and they say, why is that camera looking at us? You can comment. So as the camera goes, Matt leads, they hear, well, this year's very different. For the first time, we have a team that's won the science fair. Team. And in fact, it's from California. And in fact, not only that, but we have 2 boys, and their name is Blake Marggraff and Matt Feddersen, and they've won the Global Science Fair Prize for the United States. So you can click forward. So there they are. It was a pretty big deal. Intel makes a big splash about this, and they really celebrate innovation, entrepreneurship early on. And let me comment as well. Blake was a preemie. He was very small as he had grown up. It's interesting, I commented about the adversity that I had experienced as a child. And very different. Blake grew up in a household. We had some financial means, and he was at a good school. It was a household with good parents. At the same time, we all have adversity. The adversity reveals itself in unknown ways, but I'm sure that everyone in this room deals with something, some type of problem and challenge that we just face on an ongoing basis. And Blake had been small and had to work at basically working to fit in with kids. He was a little geeky, and that wasn't, and we as parents observe this and we're watching, we're always concerned, we're saying, what can we do? And it was amazing because this was a turning point as well for Blake, because his confidence had grown through the process. He said, and I didn't know that was a point when you emulated or tried to say, gee, I can do something myself. But the hours he put in that science fair were countless, countless. And he'd come home at 1 or 2 in the morning and stayed late in the school and occasionally got in trouble for it. It was really striking, but it was remarkable. And as well, to see this happen and realize how one can overcome adversity and the effect that will have, which means any time your child has some adversity they deal with, and they overcome it in the simplest way, the celebration of that, the effect that has on their confidence and self-esteem can't be underestimated. So on to college. So these are way too dense to read, and I put 3 slides together because I wanted to suggest what's happened in the last 4 years. So now that Blake's gone off to school, he went to Washington University to study biology, and why don't I hand to you?
Absolutely. So step back just a little bit. I went to Washington University to study biology. I was at that point dead set on not going into business. I wanted to do research or perhaps medicine. And I was certain about that going in. And realized pretty quickly 2 things. One, I really wanted to do something more scalable. And second, the intellectual horsepower of the folks around me that really were going into medicine was phenomenal. Really quite daunting. So I started doing side projects. And speaking with Rabbi Fischel now for the past couple of months, a theme that our conversations have come back to is, well, Blake, you followed your father's path. And the reality is that wasn't the plan. That wasn't the plan. It was just a result of the incentives and the structure and the education that was provided. So staying on track now, I really did go to WashU, and I started an education technology company, once again, totally unplanned. And then more recently, as I was graduating, I knew that I wanted to land in digital health. And this was a combination of passion and experience. I did have a background in biology and some nuclear medicine. And you want to?
Look forward. So Blake, it began. Eventually, go back for just a second, because he would not say this, but I'll get to be a dad. Back one more. So along the way, down in the lower right corner, he ended up on a wild television experience with Mia. Who watches Big Bang Theory? So if you watch that, there's the actress from Big Bang, and to the right is Bill Nye the Science Guy. So he was able to meet those folks, and various Arch Grant winnings on competitions and so forth. So along the way, some pretty good success. And then started this company, ePharmix, and he's been closing his financing for this company. Already just crossed $1 million in financing for this, and there we are. So he's CTO. Where do you see, the question asked by this interview, where do you see yourself in 10 years? I guess the answer you said, I'm interested in your thinking on that answer, as a multiplier, finding, supporting, and scaling impactful technologies and teams through capital and connections. So that's going to lead us to asking a question as well. Go ahead, one more. So what I thought we'd do next is two parts. This is a list of stories that Blake and I have discussed that we found along the way, since as long as he can remember and before, I've added mine. And we've categorized them in a number of areas. So empathy and respect, this is random. Didn't prioritize these in any way. Mental math, self-confidence, trust, mental energy and curiosity, creativity and curiosity, situational awareness, humility, entrepreneurship, and the indelible moment. And under each of these now, there's a little story. Some are 1 or 2 notes, others are longer. So I put these here. I thought what I'd do is pick a couple now, and then I'd like to flip this around because we're going to get some of your stories, and then we're going to combine them. So first off, ones that stand out for me here that I thought I spoke about already the car ride and thinking. And another one that I'd like to note is, this is an obvious one, and many of these relate to things that happen every day, because it's those moments that happen when you're least expecting it that have the biggest impact. We can work and try to program, but it's those moments that you don't expect. But here's one that we think about. So, the handshake. As parents, what do we do to teach our children to meet and greet another person, an adult, and what should the greeting be? And I happen to be raised in a family, and I happen to learn that a handshake is an important part of that. But what I'd never been told, and something that we really worked at with our children, was what does that really mean? And we can go back to the history of open hand, palm, no weapon. But more importantly, there's an opportunity when you reach out and shake someone's hand to take that hand and see the person and stop. And it's interesting because kids, when you tell them to shake hands, I don't know, it's not easy because they don't want to. And it's a little funny. Why should they do this? It's an awkward ritual. But if it's possible to guide a child to realize, it's not just shaking a hand. What you're doing is you're looking at that person in the eyes to see them, to think about them, to understand who they are, why they're there, what your relationship is with them. And all that happens in the 2 or 3 seconds that you shake someone's hand. If that can occur, the handshake is not an issue at all. It's much more the opportunity to look at that person and see who they are, and then bring that back. And we talk about that after the fact, because after that handshake, there's an opportunity now to talk about, what did you see? What did you see in that person? Did they look back at you? Did they smile? Tell me about them. And that led to one other story I'll just say right now that's tied to it. So I took that same idea, and my wife and I discussed this, and we take turns, but you sit in a restaurant, again, a common place for families with children, and stop and say, okay, it's time. And I'd pick a person walking by and say, look at this woman, and she's walking by, tell me who she is. Tell me her pain, tell me her loves, tell me her passions, tell me about her, and what she does, everything. It's a wonderful event because it causes you to see people and to try to understand from an empathetic perspective what they might be all about, who they are, and to think about what that means. So we used to do that as well. The last one I'll mention now is what I call the indelible moment. And these are moments that happen sometimes when you're aware and thinking about them, and other times when you're not aware at all with your children. But there are moments when your child is like a whiteboard and they're a blackboard, and whatever you say sticks, and it sticks just permanently. Sometimes you're aware of it because you see the way they look at you, the way you're talking to them, the way you're engaged. Other times you don't know, and you find out many years later, as I have in this discussion, things that stuck that I had no idea. But look for those moments, because when they happen, you can tell something to your child and you know they're listening to you, and you run with it. Because if they're listening and they're intent and they're really with you, boy, that can be a permanent change for them. So I look for those moments, and did look for those moments all the time, the indelible moment. So let's go forward. So now, there's some paper and pencil. Let's see. Why don't you, did we decide to keep, yeah, we did. So, yeah, there you go. So,
Perfect, thank you. So first, and we'll get to formal questions, but thoughts on stories. If you want to start writing those down now, please do. Yeah.
we haven't done it yet. We'll get to the questions.
Right.
You run right.
Okay, thank you. So where we are today, a big part of the story, half of the story that's been absent, is my mom and my sister, and touching on those.
I'll click for you.
Thank you very much. So, quick background. My younger sister Annie is 2 years younger. She was one of the top 100 cross-country runners in the state of California, and she promised for 2 years, not to join me at whatever college I decided to attend, and promptly joined me at Washington University in St. Louis. Visited, fell in love with the cross-country and track and field teams and the food, and is now studying biology on a veterinary track. And my mom, just because this was another major source of inspiration. In second grade, my mom bought herself a gift certificate for one private pilot training lesson. And she was too embarrassed to go in and buy the lesson herself, so she came back and said, "Oh, I have this gift certificate, will you please give me a lesson?" And she liked it so much that she got her VFR, her license to fly small aircraft, then her IFR, so now she could fly in complete cloud conditions, and then her multi-engine, and then her commercial license, and then her instructor ground license, and then something that only about 0.02% of pilots get, she got her in-air instructor license. And this happened as my sister and I were going through some of our hardest years in school, through junior year of high school, notoriously difficult. And talk about a reason to study the extra couple of hours when your mom is right downstairs doing that as well. Perfect. You have to, yep. So my dad and I walked through this a few times, and I decided that rather than tell a bunch of very small stories, I'd try to extrapolate out elements of growing up that I thought were most impactful. Again, conversations prior. One big bonus, I think, of always having 2 or 3 problems on which you're chewing is having questions that come to mind. And most of the time I would ask those questions, and somehow my dad knew the answer. And then when I started to become 6 or 7, they became a little bit more complex. And one question in particular, as we were driving from our home in the Bay Area up to Tahoe, one question was, Dad, how much electricity do windmills produce? And I think that was the first time I'd asked a technical question, which must have been pleasing to you as an engineer. And he looked at me and said, you know, that's a good question. And I said, you know, whenever you don't know the answer, you always say, that's a good question. And he said, that's a good point. And then promptly pulled out his phone, flip phone, and called a service where you could pay 99 cents and have a question answered for you. And talk about enabling. I had no idea that you could ask a question and within 5 minutes have an answer. So one major area of impact, always ask the big questions and then always find the real answers. Next, and this is something that I will credit my dad with saying prior to Marissa Mayer, the current CEO of Yahoo, but it's always do the hard thing. When you're presented with a choice in life, when you're presented with a fork in the road, if in doubt, first determine what is moral and what is honest, and then choose the path that is more difficult. And something that I think you've embodied pretty nicely. And of course, honest work generally means avoiding shortcuts. I learned this firsthand. So I was also fortunate because my dad grew up in a household of woodworkers. And you passed that along to me. And I said, you know, we have this new dog. I really want to build a Snoopy-style doghouse, red with custom shingles, and it has to look perfect. And rather than sitting down with me and sketching it out for the first time, you said, go for it. Go for it. Build the doghouse. Watch when you use the power tools, but you know, go for it. Try your best. And I decided that I would just start. So I started cutting wood, and strangely, nothing fit together. I pulled out my sheet of paper, something that my mom had been telling me to do the whole time, and sketched it out. You know, I think whether it's science or a business, having a plan is one of the most powerful things. Doesn't matter if the plan is wrong. And I was fortunate to learn that so young. I think I'm still learning it sometimes. Finally, problem solving is often the go-to. We see something, at least I see something, and I try to jump to the solution. I would see my mom was frustrated with one of my many choices, and I would try and propose a solution. I would try and argue or maybe negotiate. My sister was doing something that would bother me. I would try to resolve it. One of the single greatest lessons, and guarantee that this was not an engineering course, so shows more insight and depth, was try to empathize. Do more than put yourself in the other person's shoes. Try to argue from their side, and imagine that you really were feeling what they were feeling. So that's been good.
Thanks. Okay, now we shift a bit. So you have paper and pencil, and there are 3 questions you'd like to pose. First question would be simple. It's looking right now, what are your biggest concerns in raising your children? The second question is, what are 3 attributes that define success for your young adult when they are, let's say, age 23 years old? So I want you to go to the future and look ahead and say, what are the attributes that are going in your mind? What is success for your 23-year-old son or daughter? 3 different characteristics. The third one is, what are the 3 aspects of the relationship that you'll have with your 23-year-old child that you think you'll enjoy the most? So I'd like to take a few minutes and collect your thoughts on those items. Are we there? Okay. So we had a discussion as we were coming out tonight, saying what can we do to offer value to you? And I want to be sure we do that. And so I really, I'm going to ask what your thoughts are on this. And we're here to do anything we can to share anything we've done or learned about one another, about our family, and about things we've encountered along the way. So please let us do whatever we can. So first off, we'd like to share something. First of all, biggest concerns. What are some concerns? What is it?
Career paths.
Career paths. Okay, career paths. What else?
Keeping them safe.
Safety. Keep them safe. Yep.
Feeling of success on a daily basis, big or small.
Feeling success, ongoing, every day. By the way, how many said safety? Okay, it's about a third. Keeping it safe. Career paths.
Healthy.
Healthy. Okay. What else?
Happy.
Happy. What does happy mean? Happy. You see joy. Okay.
Respectful.
Respectful. How to teach them respect and be respectful. Okay. Yes.
Finding passion.
Finding passion.
You know, you enjoy something that you're really passionate about.
And how do you do that?
I don't know.
How do you do that?
Exposure. I mean, for me, it's an exposure. Letting them play, create. But not pigeonholing that into certain activity.
If there's one thing about passion that I'll say definitively, and this I'll offer a very specific answer to, their passion is your passion. That's it. That mirror is the biggest thing you can offer your kids. I watch kids with parents that have no passion, and I see passionless kids. I see kids that are passionate, I meet the parents that are passionate. It's a question of how you bring that home. And that's a big issue, because that means that if you're finding yourself and you're doing something you're not passionate, decide if that's where you want to be, if you can change, or think about what that means to your family as well. Because when you come home and you're excited about something, it's contagious. Your kids, they can't help it. I mean, there's a note up there in the stories, under the last story for me, I'd come home, and Blake mentioned before, my daughter and my son knew everything about my business. They knew the highs and they knew the lows. They knew the HR problems and the fact that I was running out of money. They knew the fact that we just got a patent signed and we had a big win, and they saw, a success on television. They heard it all, and we discussed it all the time. But what they saw, it wasn't just the wins or the losses that they saw. What they saw was the passion that I had about the whole thing, and they were part of that. And I would say that anybody here, whatever your profession is, you can bring that to your children. It doesn't, law, accounting, it's a question of how you see it and what you bring. If you're passionate about it, you'll bring that to them. If you're not, again, find a way to be, or find a way to expose them to people, your friends, family, relatives, someone that shares that passion, and then thrill in the passion with them so they see it as well. Okay? Safety in careers. Safety is not much to say. That's a concern that all parent has. My wife continues to be concerned about Blake's safety all the time. And boy, I tell you, the time the number of conversations we had about that chemistry lab in the garage, I can't tell you. And of course, I'd say, don't worry, hon, it's okay, because he's going to be the next, name it, Einstein. He's going to conquer cancer. So that was interesting. Okay, let's go forward with the next one. So next one is attributes. So we're in the future. So what defines success for your 23-year-old? And I put up a year. We talked about what year. This is basically assuming your child is roughly, I think, 4 to 19 years from now, until they're 23. I don't know the age. I think kids here are probably 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that right? Okay. Okay, so there we are. So it's in the range. So we're pretty far what looks like an terminal distance to the future right now. And you're tired, you've got young children, and I can feel that. It's nice not to have to go home and manage through that day by day and hour by hour. So, but even so, it's in the future. So what is success?
Being self-sufficient.
Being self-sufficient. Being independent. Self-sufficiency. Resourceful. Integrity. Okay?
Self-esteem.
Self-esteem. So self-sufficiency and self-esteem. Related, but still different. Yes? Compassionate. Compassionate. I love to say along with that is empathetic. And back to the handshake. Try that with your child. Talk to them about a handshake and see what you can do to get them to look in someone's eyes when they shake their hand and what that means. and you'll be astounded at the conversations that will lead you to. Just amazing. Okay, what else?
Honesty, back to what you had mentioned earlier.
Honesty. Honesty. I had the founder of Leapfrog, when I sold my company, Explore Technologies, to Leapfrog. His name is Mike Wood, a brilliant man and a great friend, and truly inspirational. It's been a fellow I've looked up to for years and years. I was with him this past weekend. He was formerly a lawyer, and the way he ran Leapfrog was just, the words he used were absolutely squeaky clean. But wherever there was a question in a gray area of ethics, there was no question. It was just completely one side. And I saw that, and I realized what that meant. It's certainly not the case all the time in business, but it was in that company, and that was a culture we brought, and we brought that home to our children as well. And when your kids learn, and they will happen, it'll happen, they'll learn to push the edge, and to test you, and to, you find this happened along the way. You see that they're sliding down this slope of creating a little story and another little story. You catch that and bring it back. And again, remember, you're the mirror. You are the mirror continuously. So they see and they do what you do, always uncannily. Okay? Next one. What 3 aspects of your relationship with your child would you enjoy the most?
Communication, open communication.
Open communication. So affection. Affection.
Friendship.
Friendship.
Trust.
Trust. Trust. Huge.
Respect, hopefully.
And respect. Yeah. So I think what astounded me when Blake was stepping off for college, when I realized he was leaving, and everyone says it goes by fast, and right now it doesn't feel it, but it does go by fast, and it's gone. And I thought, well, new chapter, he's leaving, and boy, that was hard for me, even before he left. And then he left, and it was easier. It was easier because I realized we were in more communication after he left than we were probably the year before he was leaving. And one of the things we have that's a blessing for us today is communication tools, and that the behavior and the habits of this generation and your generation of kids as well, they're connected and they communicate. So that's one form of communication. It doesn't mean openness, it doesn't mean connectedness, it doesn't mean compassion, empathy directly with you. But so how does that happen? Blake, want to answer that?
I have no idea what you're going to say. Hand it to you.
Right. So openness and communication, I think, is predicated on just about every other element of the relationship that you name. It's predicated on respect, on trust, on a mutual understanding of imperfection. I think it happens best, and I can speak for many of my friends that left college. It's happening best for those of us that are at least somewhat self-sufficient. We have taken control of our own lives. I'll leave it at that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, it does. I think at the heart of it is as well, all those things come together. They're all self-reinforcing, and they don't just sprout after the fact. For some kids, they do. Some kids will leave, and your parents are just, they don't get anything until a few years after college. Fortunately, we went through middle school and high school with the regular challenges that all parents face. But what we felt is that the connection that we've had through the combination of passion, of openness, of the trust that we've shared in our household, with a few basic principles and rules that are just part of the household. Discipline is a wonderful thing. I think everyone here probably knows and agrees with that. Over-discipline can squash the life out of kids. We've seen that happen as well. On the other hand, no rules leads kids down a path where they don't know where to go, and we've seen disasters there. So we found a balance, and I think that's appropriate. You each find your own. Okay. Actually, yeah, that's good. So we're watching time, and it's late. So I'll put this back up. Let's open it. I'd be happy, and Blake would be happy. We share some stories. A lot of these are, the early years are mine. Be happy to, they're provocative, they're just titles, so you have to take your guess. It's like a grab bag. But if there's anything here that looks interesting, if you can read it in the back, just pick one. We'll do a handful of these, and or any questions that you have that you'd like to ask. Yes?
I'd like to hear
The apology. Okay. So parents apologizing to kids, or kids apologizing to parents? Well, this one I happened to write down because it was the prior. So There are those moments when you're upset with your children and you decide, you're stressed and life is difficult. And so that happened with us, and I remember losing, I had a dad who happened to lose his temper in very negative ways. Fortunately, I never did that, but I do remember reaching that point of frustration when you explode. And how do you do that if you're the mirror? What are you teaching your children? So the apology that resulted from that, which was very short time after my outburst, was a long talk with an apology for what it did and what it meant, and a discussion about the fact that that's not who I am and not who I ever wanted my kids to be. So those are moments, and they're pretty important. Yeah.
The breakfast words.
Sorry?
The breakfast words.
The breakfast words.
That's a great choice.
You want to?
No, go for it.
Okay. So I because of my time at LeapPad, I had a lot of exposure to different forms of learning and pedagogy, and we created a scope and sequence for the LeapPad. I worked with best educators around the country. I also had a passion for mnemonics. If anyone knows what that means, that's learning with memory tricks, and that led to some wonderful, wonderful things that we did. And there's one story up there as well. But it also meant I had a lot of respect for them and used that as a tool. And there are some books called, got to get the title, they're books on memorizing words, vocabulary words for 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th graders that you memorize with mnemonics. And they have really funny pictures, and they're just delightful. So we would sit down every Sunday morning, and we'd pick 10 words. My wife and I would pick 10 words, and we'd sit there and we'd go through them with mnemonics. And mnemonics are rhymes, they're funny pictures, etc. But it's one tool that you can offer, because vocabulary is really dry. And kids typically don't like it, particularly if the parents do it. And they say, the first couple times you did it, said, Dad, I've already got vocabulary. I'm learning it at school. I don't need it anymore. But we did this, and because it was fun, it really worked. So those were some breakfast words. Yeah. Yes?
Can I hear about the bomb shelter?
You get this one. The hole in the backyard.
That's right. So more than a slight misnomer, but I think my dad had some fun with the titles. So many of my experiments involved what you call energetic reactions. Everything from producing hydrogen gas with hydrochloric acid and aluminum to mixing sodium benzoate with oxidizers. And the rule was, and if there's a single takeaway, it's this. The rule was before I could do anything, I had to put together a one-page white paper on the experiment. But I did that, and it got exciting to the point where we went to Home Depot and bought the materials that we needed to put what looked like a very miniaturized bomb shelter, but a small reaction pit in our backyard. I'm not sure. I think, I'm pretty sure that ended in safer experiments, but it was really the process that brought us there.
Just about enough on that one. So he did dig a hole, and the point was, for those who know the scientific method, figuring out a hypothesis, then moving through the steps to validate it and understand why and close the loop. So that was very important for me, and it made that part of the science. It wasn't just going and buying equipment to make it flash. There had to be a purpose and a reason for doing the experiment, and that changed the entire approach. So Blake and Matt frequently wrote up descriptions of what they were trying to do. So when he did vary this, at this point it was getting pretty sophisticated, because now we had to say he wanted a bigger kind of explosive reaction, and said, you've got to convince me that you're measuring it and that there's purpose, and you're learning something from this that's going to be worthwhile. So there was this little, but the funny thing was there was a hole in the lower part of our backyard with a wood box with cement poured in the bottom of it, and you put it down with rocks on top of it. And this ended one day when they got a little overzealous in the mixture, and my wife was in the kitchen, and the house went boom. And at that point, there were no more. It was filled in. Remember.
That was a friend of mine, to be clear, actually, and not me.
It wasn't. That's right.
That friend didn't come back for about 2 months after that.
That's right. Yes.
The internship.
I'm sorry. The internship.
Yes.
This was, if there's any way possible, there's always the question of bringing your child to your work and how you bring them in, how you introduce them. We have days where, dad days, and you can bring your kids in. As I told you, my kids were very much part of my work. But it was later on, after I'd founded LiveScribe, that Blake was looking at what he would do for the summer. And I introduced him to some people on the team and had to handle it very carefully, because this is not the CEO saying, hey, hire your son. So I had to manage through that, but actually was able to. And the most exciting thing about that for me was I remember the first time he came in, and I have company meetings weekly. And I'll pick a word of the week that I talk about and give some stories on and tie it back to what we're doing, why it's important. And the moment that Blake sat down in the company meeting, we had about 80 people, and he was able to listen, and I saw him engage, and I saw other people, and he was able to see Dad in that situation. So a couple thoughts on. One is, if there's a way to, again, tie your child to your work, do it. If you can find a way for them to be associated or near you in your work in some way that doesn't violate too many issues, I'd encourage that as well. And so he had a summer internship, and he produced a lot of good work. Yes, sir.
The bully.
Which story?
The bully?
Oh, the bully.
Oh, the bully.
Yep.
Okay. We did agree prior that I would tell this one and provide thoughts. Strength of character, I think, would be the phrase that my mom used when she referred to certain actions that television protagonists would take, that movie characters had, and I didn't really know what it meant until I found myself in the changing room prior to PE in 4th grade, becoming really upset because one kid in the class who had pretty strong personality kept making fun of verbally and then pushing a classmate of mine who was overweight and just not the popular kid in the class. And I saw this and I got upset, and I saw this and I got upset, and I saw this, and then I turned around and walked into a bathroom stall, and then shook my head and thought, how could I go home and tell my mom about my day if I were to include this part? And walked back out and said to the kid who was pushing my friend around, "Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this?" And it was funny because everybody in that changing room stopped and looked at the bully and waited. And it was probably about 5 seconds. And he said, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. No, I'm sorry. And then he walked out, and I think he almost forgot his shirt as he was walking out. But it was just that one moment of honestly asking myself, would I be proud to go back and share this with my mom when she asked what I had done that day?
If there'll be times when hopefully your son or daughter comes home, or you have an event like this, or you talk to them when they are 23, or hopefully when they're 30, and I look forward to that time, when you learn something from them, and that happens a lot. And when it happens, more recently, people have said, "You, Jim, what's it going to be like? Your son's going to do more great things than you," which is a funny comment. And my reaction to that is, I can't tell you the thrill and the hope that brings to me. If he can do anything that makes him happy, that allows him to reach his full potential, which was part of our upbringing, and it was so great to hear Eddie speak about that early on. It's about kids looking for, and for you looking for learning moments that become practical, that are applicable, and then finding ways to make that happen. But when that does occur, and you realize, you look at your child and you see them do something that is brings a level of reflection on who they are, and who they've become, and you start to look at them and say, would I do that? Would I do that? And you think twice, and you find yourself becoming more motivated because you're looking at your child do something that you see them capable of doing that you've not thought about before. I think that's probably one of the best moments. Okay, look. So this was a picture after we had the celebration. This Father of the Year. There was a story. It turns out Blake, there was a picture, I guess, along the way of the Father of the Year when he was behind the podium. He could just about see over it. And this is a pretty big event in San Francisco. And they asked him to get up and speak. And he said,
I don't need the microphone for this. So I had been preparing this speech really for the last half hour in a stairwell with one of my dad's friends who was walking me through it. And he'd always chuckle when I got to this line. So I stood up there, passing compliments, saying, I've learned this, and my dad and I chat when he comes home at night, and that means a whole lot to me. And I said, there are a lot of dads that could have won Father of the Year, but there are a lot of dads out there who couldn't have won this award. And was surprised when everybody laughed. I thought that was a completely logical statement.
That's right. Do the last one. So this is a snapshot of my son and Blake and Annie, again, when they were just probably a little bit older than your children are now. And to the right, I think may sum it all up for us, because there's that word passion. And we took this picture because we said, gee, what are our passions? And if you look at the picture, you'll see Blake in a karate pose, which at the time was his passion. You'll see Annie in a pose for cross-country running, which she's done since then. And as I said, Blake said, she's a pretty good runner. You'll see me holding a pen, that's the fly pen top. And you'll see my wife looking ahead at, and this was just when she had gotten started with her flying. And we supported one another in our passions. We talked about them, we shared them, and again, passion ignites passion. So, I'm official. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here tonight and to share our thoughts. This was wonderful for us because we've been able to share our passions together in discussing this and preparing. And I hope that something, one or two ideas, causes that spark that you can take away in a way that means something and is helpful to you and your families in the future. So, thank you very much.